Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Talkback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. So I've been off for a few days, a week. I got a strike from YouTube. They claim it was hate speech, but they won't explain or indicate what that hate speech was. So I was quoting a number of media personalities and the language that they use, not that I used, that they used, and quoting those words and those phrases and saying, look, this is how the media is presenting it, look at what they're saying. And then YouTube says, oh no, that you're engaging in hate speech, but all the videos that I quoted from are all still on YouTube, so I don't know. They haven't explained what it was or how they arrived at that determination. So I completely and totally reject their claims and their assertions and their framing of it. But nonetheless, let's get down to this video here. Now, I think most people will have noticed, and being a sort of a law and a legal watcher myself, I maybe see it a bit more than others do. But the instances where activist judges are put in place in the courts, this is senior judges, courts of appeal, particularly the junior courts or the lower courts. I think the lower courts have already been lost pretty much completely now to judicial activists or activists posing as judges, but quite a number of the superior or appeals courts have. So really, you're only at the Supreme Court level before you're likely to find a majority of law judges. But even there's some serious incursions. If you look at some of the people that have been appointed, for example, to the U.S. Supreme Court, Jackson and Sotomayor and so on. Seriously, you wouldn't hire them as a law clerk, let alone put them in the fucking Supreme Court. But the same's happening all over the Western world. So I'm not singling out the US or any particular jurisdiction. Really, it's happening in Australia and Britain, and particularly the Anglosphere, but not exclusively. And increasingly, there are boutique courts that are appearing as specialist rape courts or children's courts or this or that, where they're, again, as soon as you see any boutique court like that, it's absolutely shot through with extreme activists, not just people that may have sympathies in a certain area, but they're being specifically picked because they're radical doctrinaire activists. And that's fine, by the way, but not if they're going to be put in a position of interpreting the law and prescribing punishments and these sorts of things. I don't believe activists have any place in that. The law has a place, and very sober, independent and impartial judgment of the law and facts and evidence are. But we've lost that. And the globalist project, it very much requires all of us to change the way we think and behave if the project is to have any chance of being implemented. And they're a decent way along with being implemented, but to the globalists, impartial, independent judges engaging in a sober analysis of the law and the law being codified, it's made of words, so it's being interpreted. That's something the globalists just can't tolerate, because the globalists must have the capacity for arbitrary law to decide, well, today we need to crush white people, and today we need to do this and that. So they need arbitrary law on their side, and they need to be able to act arbitrarily as and when they choose, based on any expediency they need to apply in order to continue implementing the globalist project. So the codified law and independent courts, these things have to go. They've got no place in the globalist order. Now, the main reason for this is the globalist project is ideological. It's not based in any of the people don't want it. No one's voted for it. It's a bunch of very powerful rich elites have decided that's how it's going to be, and are imposing it on the rest of us without our consent or agreement. So to do that, whenever you get ideological government being imposed on you, that ideological government must have the capacity to act arbitrarily, but yet to use the teeth of the legal system, the police and prosecutors' departments and activist courts, because if they don't, even if they don't put you in prison, they can bankrupt you and they can harass you until you fall into line and these sorts of things, even though you've broken no law. So to oppose the ideology or to question it is in itself a crime now, but only ideological crime. It's not an actual crime. And you can see that the way they go after Donald Trump. Of course, they have to sift around and try and invent something that makes it look justified when they go after him. But the reality is it's an ideological witch hunt, and as it is with many people, the January 6th people. And you see it all over, even in England. There's a woman quietly praying, not saying a word, who's within 100 metres or so of an abortion clinic, and a number of police will turn up to arrest her, even though she's done nothing, committed no crime. And these sort of things increasingly are the case. So arbitrary law is this is how it is. To get arbitrary law, they need activist judges, and so activist judges are being put all over the courts. So what can we do about it? Well, there are various things. Well, we just get rid of the activist judges. Okay, but who decides? Who gets rid of the? Well, what's the mechanism and the process for getting rid of these activist judges? Hey, you're an activist, motherfucker. You're out of here. How do we do this? Now, the process for getting, say, in some jurisdictions I looked at, the process for getting rid of a judge is that 2/3 of the parliament, and I think it's both houses of parliament, must vote for the judge be removed, and it's for malpractice or something like that. Typically, judges are involved in serious scandals will resign and just quietly go away, or maybe they get arrested. That mechanism for getting rid of judges is the 2/3 majority thing. It's very rarely ever achieved, and they're very rarely ever dragged before the parliamentarians. Given that now the idea is that parliamentarians were the representatives of the people, which they no longer are. The parliamentarians in the Western world are the representatives, the stooges, the flunkies of the globalists. You may get a handful that see themselves as representatives of the people, but the majority, and certainly the ones who hold the levers of power, are all globalist flunkies and stooges. So we can't rely on parliamentarians to do that, nor should we. It's just simply not going to work anymore. The days when the politicians were the representatives of the people, sure, that had some possibilities, but no longer. So that's not really an option. Do we just go about arbitrarily firing judges we don't like? No, we don't want that. Do we set up a special panel to determine which judges are activists and which not, and get rid of them? Well, the panel could be infected by any sort of political or ideological movement. They could stack that panel with their members or their acolytes and flunkies. So that doesn't, that's too easy to corrupt. So we have to find a way of preventing activist judges from hearing cases. Now, whenever you look at any situation and say, well, all we need to do is take out the bad things, just like cut them out, just take out the bad things, then only the good things will remain. It doesn't work that way in the real world. So as soon as you move one component of a very complicated matrix out, as soon as you move that out, then in that complicated interactive matrix of multiple moving parts, then something else will fill that void. Now, it may not be as bad, or maybe it's worse or whatever, but something else will fill it. And that's very hard to determine ahead of time what that will be exactly, given, again, the complexity of all the multiple, the moving parts in the matrix. So this idea of we just take out the bad things and only good things will remain, that's a childlike fantasy, really. The reality of the world isn't like that. So what do we do to create a situation where litigants are not forced to have their case heard by an activist judge? That's really sort of so the effect of the activist judge is that say a January 6th defendant can be, in the US, can be dragged in front of an activist judge that's got Trump derangement syndrome, that believes that all white people are Hitler, and has extreme ideological views, and therefore will interpret the law and will only allow certain evidence to be considered, and that process will be consistent not with any legal process or any codified process, but it'll be consistent with their ideological views, their doctrinaire views, their activism. So to give you some examples, in Australia, I'm staggered at how often climate protesters, if they're arrested at all, which is fairly rare, how often climate protesters are dragged into court or get into court, and a very, very pro-climate change judge is assigned to the case. Now, that just doesn't happen in the real world. So we're looking at corruption, as in corruption of the legal process, corruption in a number of areas here. One, there's policing. The police are very reluctant to arrest climate protesters. Second is the Department of Prosecutions is very reluctant to prosecute a climate protester. Again, the activism there. Then when it gets to the court, and the perpetrator is very clearly guilty and culpable. So if they appoint a judge who's really tough on that sort of thing, or if a judge just randomly off the next cab off the rank, as it were, a judge is appointed, that climate change protest, given what they've done, the disrupting of the traffic and gluing themselves to the road or something, they're going to get a prison sentence and certainly a decent or a hefty fine. Plus, they're going to have to meet the court costs, so that would be a good deterrent for those. But that's not going to happen because the administration of the court allocates a judge to hear that case who is a very pro-climate change activist themselves, and they just let the protester off. He goes straight back out and starts protesting again. So now this sort of thing of, for example, a man gets accused of rape, say, and they'll appoint a judge who is an activist and a fanatic in assuming that all men are rapists and should be sent to prison. That judge gets assigned to hear the case. So what we're seeing across the Western world, and not only that there are many activist judges, which there are, or judicial officers, it could be lower magistrates. Not only that, but these judges rather are getting hand-picked and assigned to cases that are consistent with their activism. So they're matching up the activist judge, with a case in their area of activism. So now, when you're looking at how an activist judge operates, there's a certain amount of judicial discretion, so they can engage in a lot of misbehaviour, which is blatantly a blatant attempt to stack the outcome, the legal outcome, in one direction or another. And they do various methods, which I've spoken about in other videos, like they won't allow say the accused rapist, for example. So the accused rapist has 3 witnesses that says that he wasn't there at the time. And the judge won't allow those witnesses to give evidence. The judge will find some sort of minor problem with it, or will simply not allow them, or the judge will keep on postponing the time that these witnesses can give evidence until, after a number of days, the witnesses can't stay anymore. And I've seen this personally. I've personally witnessed this sort of judicial activism where the judge won't allow the witnesses that would prove the person was innocent. They won't allow the witnesses, and then the judge will turn to the witness. The accused will say, "Well, I've kept my witnesses here for 3 days. They've got jobs to go to, Your Honour, and now they've had your witnesses have had to go home, so they're not there anymore. They're not there. Well, I'll hear the witnesses now." And the judge blatantly delays it till the witnesses have gone, and then says, "Okay, now I'll hear them." "Oh, the witness is not here. Too bad for you. You got no evidence." Blatant judicial activism and stacking the outcome. And again, I've seen that absolutely firsthand. I've sat in the court, and my jaw dropped about how brazen the judge was in his activism. Now, these sort of little tricks are what these activist judges use, these little devices. Now, sure, you can appeal a lot of these things. That one could have been appealed, for example, but you need a lot of financial resources to do it. Remember, the other side is being funded by the taxpayer. They've got infinite resources. whereas the accused has to pay for his own legal case. So he's on his own. Now, again, and the prosecutors will offer plea deals here, saying, "Look, buddy, you'll be bankrupted. The legal fees alone will, you'll be in debt for the next million years. You'll never be able to live your life. Why don't you cop a deal for 12 months in prison? Go on, just cop a deal for that. And, hey, with good behaviour, you'll be out in 6 months. What's your problem? Just cop it, and that can be attractive if someone looks down the track and they say, my life is ruined forever. Or I can do 6 months in the slammer. I get all these people off my back, then all the pressure and all the harassment ends, and that's so it's an attractive deal to someone who's really being attacked from all sides. But this is part of the wider sort of activist architecture. So these are the things that go on anyway, and these are the unpleasantness that activist judges visit upon innocent citizens, most of whom have committed no crime. Those January 6 people have committed no crime. There's a handful that for example, jostled with police or whatever. But then again, we still come back to judicial activism here. Why weren't the Black Lives Matter people arrested? Why weren't they dragged into court? Why aren't they in prison? Why about the people that broke into the Capitol building when judge confirmation hearings were on? They were banging on the door and screaming. What about the people that went outside to harass judges like Justice Kavanaugh in the United States? Why weren't they arrested and put in prison? Why aren't they facing charges? And so on and so on. So we're looking at multiple two-tier policing here, where those that are in effect opposing or represent opposition to the globalist project, they're viciously dealt with by activist judicial officers, and the law is ruthlessly used as an activist weapon to beat those people up with. Whereas, the Black Lives Matter riots and those sort of things, that suits the globe. It creates this social dislocation that the globalists want. And so those people are performing a service for the globalists. And that's why the activist part of the legal system doesn't go chasing after them. But it shows how widespread the activist legal system is, given that there's not a prosecutor or a judge or an attorney general that wants to go after them. They're given a free pass all around. Whereas the so-called white supremacy, fascist Nazi, and the difference in the policing is that, again, those who may represent opposition to the globalist project are being chased by an activist judicial sector that were it not activists wouldn't be chasing after them, obviously. And when I say activists, this includes the federal attorney general in the United States that I can't even think of his name at the moment, but anyway. So, but what do we do about this now? I don't think it's you don't want to get into the weeds of just arbitrarily replacing judges, because if you do that, then the other guys will replace other judges. So then it turns into free for all, where anyone who and any judge can then be put under severe pressure. You better make a decision in this or that direction, otherwise you're out of a job, Buster, and this sort of thing. Merrick Garland was the Attorney General I was thinking of. So this idea of we need to bypass the problem rather than try and take it head on, because any systems and procedures, methods, devices to root out the activist judges can equally be used to root out good judges or root out judges that apply the law. Remember, they want to remove judges out of the Supreme Court simply because they apply the law or the Constitution. So the activists are very keen to get rid of law judges and very keen to replace them with activist judges. But if the reverse were the case, so well, let's get rid of the activist judges, replace them with law judges, that in itself would be a good thing, but it would invite then a response saying, yeah, you got our guys, well, we're going to get your guys. So we don't want that. That's not going to work. So the only other option, I think, is to introduce a new initiative. And I think this would be important, that activist judges can be bypassed. So if there's an activist judge gets assigned to your case, you can just say, no, I don't want that judge to hear my case. And that they'll be, the judges are actually classified as, this is a law judge, this is an activist judge, and this is an independent judge. So I think we're at a stage now we have to classify judges for their independence. Will they apply the law and the evidence and the facts? And what you'll find ultimately is that the majority of people, particularly law-abiding citizens in particular, will opt for independent judges, and that would automatically render the activist judges as unemployed or minimally employed. And this, I think, would be an important step forward. But looking at whenever I hear a judicial decision anywhere now, or anywhere across the Western world, I hear a judicial decision made, then I can tell without even knowing the names of the judge or who it was, or I can tell that if the judge was an activist or not. And I shouldn't be able to do that. The law should be applied just the same by any judge. All judges should apply the law the same. The law is written, it's codified, it's clear, the evidence and the facts tested. So, and within a small margin of error, every judge should arrive at the same conclusion, given the evidence and the facts that the judge has to adjudicate on. So this is not happening. It's not. I would say. I mean, the headline case is obviously a cupboard. I'm sure there are cases, and many of them, where the facts do matter. But in terms of these big headline precedent making, all that sort of stuff, I know straight away that the judge is an activist. I know that the judge is a flunky for the globalists in some capacity. Or I know the judge is a law judge that applies the law, independent applies the law rigorously and based on the facts. But those things are rare, and we have to accept now that the activists have taken over the legal profession, and then we have to now classify them. And so, well, you're an activist judge, and therefore a litigant has the choice. Well, I don't want that activist judge to hear my case, and that now, so it needs to be the litigant needs to have now input to say, I don't want that activist judge, or do want the activist judge, and the parties have to agree on the judge. The parties to litigation must agree on the judge, and I think that now has become the next stage. And because there are so many activists shot through in the legal system now, we have to do that. And I think if we don't take a step of this nature, then the entire legal system will become activist. Now, if we look at an ideological sort of government like the Soviet Union or China or whatever, North Korea is a case in point, any legal case that has any bearing on the ideology and the power of the state and the power to act arbitrarily, any legal case, they have the state and the ideology and the activists have a very serious stake in this. So they'll predetermine an outcome. Well, we have to have this outcome, and we have to have this party winning and this party being sent to prison. So, but they have to have a structure like that in order to protect their illegitimacy. Because remember, an ideological government is illegitimate. So they have to have crushing arbitrary power in order to maintain their position, as they would see it, to this pretend legitimacy. We just crush all opposition. That makes us legitimate. So even in the Soviet Union and China and places like that, they still had legal cases that were decided on the facts, where a legal case, particularly some legal case where they would have no bearing whatsoever on the ideology, none at all, then the facts would matter. But those cases in an ideological state, those cases are so very few that again, you might as well not bother about having independent judges. So that's my view on that we can't stop the putting of activist judges in the courts. I remember Chuck Schumer at the last senatorial elections in the US gloating that the Democrats still had majority in the Senate, which means they could put activist judges, they could continue for the next few years to put activist judges all over the legal system, and he was rejoicing in that. But that goes to show how committed these people are to putting activists all across the legal landscape. And I think the only way to stop it is to allow litigants to agree on what judges they want to hear the cases, which means that the power of the state to administratively force activist judges and insert them into certain legal cases is removed. And I think that will be the last line of defence. Being a Tassus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.